may manipulate you into it. I'm not going to do that to you today. I am hoping the next time I ask you a question, though, you're slightly more responsive. So it's a new year, always a meaningful time to reflect. Oh, you're good, bro. I got you. Give it up for Grant. He crushed the lyrics today. Any mistakes that were made were actually my mistakes. It's a new year. Always a meaningful time to reflect on the past, but probably more consider the future, right? This is not going to be a New Year's resolution sermon, although I think that there's relevance in that space, and we will talk a little bit about the future. I want to start, though, by just giving you a little bit of an idea of what's going on the next couple weeks and kind of what some of the plans are leading into the new year, at least for our Sundays. Next week, we are going to have a lesson on fasting. And that's about as much excitement as I expected. Whenever Kristen asks me, do you want to fast? In my mind, I'm like so much no. I don't. I feel pretty unspiritual saying that, and so I usually just mumble a response, and then I get there. So I want to talk to you guys about something that we're trying to do, or that we're going to put before the church in a couple weeks. The scripture that I think about, Jesus talks to his disciples, and the disciples are asking him, hey, why don't we fast? Right? Fasting, this idea of going without food and or drink, was a really common part of Jewish lifestyle. And so Jesus' followers, of course, were Jewish, and they said, why don't we fast? And Jesus says, the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from you, then you will fast. But before this, he says, while the bridegroom's with you, there's no reason to fast. He's talking about himself, of course. And so he says, look, there's going to come a time when I'm gone, and you will fast. And what I want to do is next week, I want to have, the first lesson I've done on fasting the last 3 years, to prepare us for, we want to propose a fast to the church for the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, starting January 28th, when church is going on the 20th, it's Sunday, to February 11th. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm expecting you to eat nothing for 2 weeks, if you are panicking. Panic no more. It's going to be your choice what that looks like, if you want to participate and how. And I will explain it all next week, but it's actually something I did in the previous church I was a part of that I thought was really meaningful. And so we're going to have a great, well, I don't know if it's going to be great. There's going to be a lesson on fasting that I hope is great. It will at the very least be very informative, because I think fasting is little understood and perhaps little practiced in our culture, which makes it an extra important discipline. The following week, we're going to talk about Jesus and politics, not because I enjoy politics, but because it's an election year, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because it seems like in these times, the world, which is already so divided, becomes even more so. And so I'd like to talk during that Sunday just about how Jesus approached the politics of his day, and perhaps what we can glean from that as a fellowship and part of the kingdom. Okay? And then in February, we're going to start a new series, which we'll roll out in the next couple weeks. I'm really excited about it. So the title of today's lesson is The Call of Yahweh. Nice. Yahweh, for those of you who don't know, is the Hebrew name for God, used by the Jews in the Old Testament. And I thought it would be meaningful to talk about, or at least think about, the kind of call that God or Yahweh may be giving you for the new year. And there's an important question that I want you to hold on to. And actually, throughout this sermon, I want you to write down at some point, because it may not be in your head right now, but I want you to write down the answer to this question. What is God calling you to? Or what is he calling you to do right now, this year, this season of your life? And we'll talk a lot more about that. I'm giving you a heads up because actually after the sermon, I'm going to open up for a little bit of discussion. And so you can be ready for that. And if you don't speak, I'm not going to call you out. Except maybe Titus. I might make him say something. There are, of course, different types of calls you hear day to day. In my home, one of them, which was a fairly common thing at the beginning of winter when all the bugs move in the house, is a shriek from the basement coming from my wife. That girl could shriek. And she's not afraid of killing bugs, but she preferred not to. And there were three instances actually that, I sprinted down the stairs. Like I was like, someone's in our house. Like it was at that level, the shriek, the call, the cry for help. The first time there she was cleaning up in the basement, and it looked like there was a piece of paper on the ground, and she grabbed it, and it was a spider. She like put her hands, it was like a furry. You know when they're furry?
Oh no.
It's like next level. Another time, we had left a wet towel in the basement laundry room for only Yahweh knows how long. You know that thing in your house that you walk by and you're like, oh, I'll get to it. Maybe Kristen will pick it. Somebody will pick it up. And those people thought the same thing. And weeks go by. I know we opened it up and there was a nest of big black spiders. It was like, there was like 10. Got that shriek. And then another one was a centipede about that long in our basement.
Oh my God.
Basement's a scary place to be. That's one kind of call. And even a more disheartening call that I received recently over Christmas. We had a great Christmas, but we had at one point 13 humans living in our house. That's just staying over the night. 7 kids, 6 adults, not including the other 7 adults that would come over to hang out during the day with my family, because we couldn't fit them there. So there's like 20 of us. So it was a blast, but you're so tired at the end of the day. You know, it's a good tired, but you're so done. And you know, every night we clean, and so it's like we're cleaning, and everyone had just left. I think this was our first night of liberation from the crazy hospitality responsibilities. We had just cleaned the house, and we like deep cleaned it. Like we're mopping. When's the last time you mopped? Exactly. It's been a while. Like, and we have a lot of hardwood in our house, so it's like a lot of mopping opportunity. We like deep clean the bathroom. So I'm so tired. I sit down, and you know that moment where you're like, you sit down on the couch, and you can almost feel the pressure leaving your feet. And you know that feeling? Like put your feet up, and like, oh. The moment I put my feet up, I hear, Daddy? And I'm like, Kristen, you have to take it. So everybody's not leaving. And then she goes, but I'm just like pretending like maybe it was just my nightmare, like my day nightmares. Like, well, she's not a real person. And then she goes, I threw up. It's like, it's a nightmare, don't do it. Don't leave, it'll go away. Like, just tell her to take care of it herself. It was disgusting. It was like 45 more minutes of like, yeah, I'm not even going to describe you what it's like. It was a cry for help that I did not want. I had to listen real closely for Kate, because it was quiet. Even she knew she didn't want to tell Daddy that just happened. She was like, Daddy, you know, like, I was like, oh, I got to listen closely. My wife's shriek was not. There are different types of call in your home. Of course, there are different ways that God calls to us, right? In the Bible, we have times where God calls so clearly, He sends an angel to someone, and they're terrified and thinking they're going to die. And then there are other times where, you know, there's a famous story about Elijah where he comes in a whisper, right? Sometimes God calls us so loud, it's basically a slap in the face. Perhaps you felt that call before. Sometimes God's call is so quiet that you can't hear it unless you're in complete silence and solitude. I want you to really be thinking about what is God calling you to right now, because God's path for our lives is rarely one you would choose, and if you could look back in your life, it rarely is it one you choose. But it is one that He always calls us to embrace. God is calling you to something. He's calling you to embrace that. You know, when I heard, this is kind of a remake on a sermon I did probably 4 years ago, and it's so remade it's almost completely different. But the original sermon was following the Apostle Paul, who was an apostle of Jesus, who wrote a lot of the New Testament. And the book of Acts, which is, you know, the book right after John, kind of chronicling the early church history, a lot of it's about Paul and his journeys. In his final journey, he's in Jerusalem, kind of the center of Christianity. And he gets into a bunch of trouble there. And it's too much to describe to you right now, but it's chaos, okay? And he gets sent to Rome. Now, he felt God called him to go to Rome. For a long time, he's like, I want to go preach to Caesar. I want to go preach to the Romans. But his journey from Jerusalem to Rome, chronicled starting, I think, in Acts 22 to Acts 26, is a wild ride. It's crazy. He gets put in prison. They're about to torture him, and he's like, are you sure you want to torture me? Because I'm a Roman citizen. And the centurion's like, maybe not. Could get in trouble. So he goes, and then he talks to Herod. He's there 2 years. He talks to this guy, talks to that guy. The Jews try to kill him. There's like assassins coming after him. He gets on a ship, and he gets in a shipwreck. He gets shipwrecked. He's lost at sea for like 3 days drifting. He drifts onto an island and gets bit by a snake. And he's supposed to die, but he doesn't die. And then people start worshiping. He's like, don't do that. And then he goes to Rome and he gets put under house arrest, and then we don't know what happens. And the book ends almost annoyingly. Read the end of Acts, you're like, I think the writer forgot the last chapter because I'm going to die. And the point is, it's purposeful at the end of Acts. You're supposed to feel like the story's not over.
Right.
Like it's now your story. That's what you're always trying to do. But it's a wild ride. And I will tell you, Paul felt called by God to go to Rome, but he never would have anticipated the path God brought him on to get there.
Yeah.
And that is the way life so often is. You have a destination in mind, or perhaps you don't even have a destination in mind, but you feel like God's calling you, but you have no idea what God is going to do. And perhaps you've had a year or two like that, where you look back on the year and you're like, if you told me what was going to happen last year, I would have tried everything I could to, I probably would have moved away. You know what I mean? Like I would do anything I can to avoid it. But now that I'm here, I'm so grateful it happened that way. Have you had that feeling before? It's what faith does in hindsight. When you look back on hard times and you think, wow, look at what God produced in me or in you because of your faithful endurance. Proverbs 16, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord determines their steps. We make our plans, right? And we're pumped about it. And how often does your life go the way you thought it was going to go? It's like never. It never goes the way. And when it does, you're holding your breath. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know what I mean? You're just like, when is this going to go south? I think life can feel that way. You know, for as long as I can remember, I have been a Lord of the Rings fan. So I need you to stick with me. I'm going to talk about Lord of the Rings for longer than you expected in a sermon this morning. And some of you, in your heart, maybe feel like, Kyle's such a nerd.
Yep.
You'd be right. But I want to show you that even a nerd can be sophisticated. The reason I love this story, Lord of the Rings story, and who in here has never, I'm assuming you've probably never read the book, there are probably very few of you. Who in here has never seen the movies?
Come on, Ty.
Pray for us, bro. That's pain.
I just need a second.
That's pain.
Mari, come on, bro. Come on, man. Titus and Tyler, I'm shocked and disappointed. Jill, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Patrick, yours your hand too? I'm okay with that too. I'm fine. So, for those of you that have never seen it, spoilers coming. It was written about 75 years ago, so I feel like enough time has gone by. I feel like it's fair to do so. I want to walk you through why this story I think is so rich, and then I promise I'll connect to something meaningful for you. Okay, something that has to do with Jesus. First of all, Tolkien, who is the author, was a Christian, and if you read Lord of the Rings with any kind of Christian lens, you see the allusions all over the place. And Tolkien also lived through 2 world wars. And this was written originally in 1948, published in 1954. Tolkien actually died before it got big, so he had no idea that it would become this worldwide phenomenon. I don't just love it because like there are dragons and bad guys and good guys and magic and stuff. I promise that's not even most of the reason. The reason I love this story and I think it's so brilliant is because the story is not about the fantasy aspect. It's about what happens to the characters in it.
Right.
Yeah.
If you, any great epic movie, it's about the evolution of the characters.
That's right.
And what I love about this story is, basically to run you through it, this little hobbit, this 3 feet tall little guy, like literally like the size of my son. He's actually taller than a hobbit. Who are known for their laziness and their love of leisure. And they live in a place called the Shire that's in the middle of nowhere. Like most people they think that they're a figment of their imagination. They don't even think they're real. They're so little seen outside their little world. This little hobbit, a part of a kind of a nobody community, is handed this world-shaping, powerful talisman. It's called the Ring of Power. And this power has the ring to destroy the world in the wrong hands. And he's sent on this journey. And he has to go to the most dangerous place on earth, this place called Mordor.
Nice.
You can't just say Mordor, you just say Mordor, right? And he's sent there and he has to get past this all-seeing eye, this evil dark lord. And to get there, he has to run away from demons and man-eating wolves and orcs and he has to sneak past the most evil Dark Lord, who, if caught, would torture him until he died. Pretty brutal. I promise I'll get to good things. He has to sneak past him basically into his backyard, and he has to throw this ring into this volcano. It has to be this volcano. No, you can't burn it. You can't chop the ring with an axe. It's this super magical talisman. There's only one way to destroy it. You got to go to this guy's backyard, and you got to pop it in. The problem is, Sauron, the Dark Lord, he knows who has it, or he thinks he does, and he's searching for it. And if he finds it, it's the end of the world. One of the fascinating things about the story is there's these characters that they show up out of nowhere on a fairly consistent basis throughout the books. These giant eagles that you could ride on, which sounds fun and very dangerous. And at different parts of the movie, they swoop down and save the day. And actually, at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, Frodo gets it in the volcano. If you're going to be technical, Gollum actually falls with the ring into the fire. That's a major spoiler. At the end, Frodo and Sam, the heroes that they take care of business, they finally hit the volcano. 3 books and 1,000 pages later, or 12 hours if you watch the extended edition, which is a thing. It's a long time.
It's true. I own it.
The volcano explodes. It erupts as soon as they do it. And they're on the side of this volcano, and they know that they're about to die. And these good eagles swoop down and snatch them up, and they take them home. Now, even a casual observer would think, after watching 12 hours of movie, after spending 30 hours of reading, you would think, couldn't we have just skipped all that other stuff? Couldn't Frodo have just jumped on one of these eagles in the Shire? Just flown over everything, and just dropped that sucker right in. It would have made for a quicker movie. And the answer is yes, that could have happened. Why didn't it happen? Because the story, it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. It's not about how the story ends. Tolkien wasn't trying to give you a solution to Middle-earth's problem. Tolkien was trying to tell a story of transformation. And so you have the giant man-eating spiders. There's a man-eating spider in it. There's swamps filled with the dead. There's these giant razor-sharp mountains. Why? Because it wasn't about efficiency for Tolkien. It was about this story he was writing to help us understand how, in community, we transform. With a common purpose and together, we're better together. We're different together. So he titles the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring. He wasn't interested in efficiency. The story, each of the characters are very fascinating. I'm going to run through them very quickly. So you have Boromir. Sean Bean is the actor. He dies in, he's this kind of funny thing about him. He dies in every movie he's in. Like, it's really sad on the show. And Boromir starts off in the story as a self-centered, frightened man lusting for power. And he ends the story, and he's actually particularly dismayed and irritated by the inclusion of the hobbits in their little fellowship, because he thinks they're worthless. And at the end of the first movie, he dies sacrificing himself for these hobbits. In perhaps one of the most heart-wrenching scenes of sacrifice in movies. I mean, it's this amazing, and it matters to you because you care about him, because you see his transformation. You see him start to love these friends and care, and he starts to change. Like, love transforms him. And his sacrifice actually sets the tone for the rest of the movies. It's very important to the movies. You have Aragorn, who is a man who should be king. And if he were to understand his destiny, he could transform the world. But he's been hiding away for something like 60 years. I know he looks young. It's a magic thing. By the end of the movie, he has conquered these fears. And it's been a journey for him. And he becomes this king. And he really, you could point to him as, other than Frodo, as the most significant, important character in this world. He changes everything. He ushers in a time of peace not seen for millennia before. These two, Legolas and Gimli. Legolas is everybody's favorite character in the movie. You know, he's got his bow and arrow. He's awesome. Him and Gimli are part of 2 different races. And this is a friendship about overcoming prejudice. They hate each other. And they hate each other for no better reason than they were told to hate each other. And at first, they're the source of greatest division other than Boromir, the guy who died. They're the source of greatest division in the Fellowship, and they become the most epic friendship in Middle-earth. In fact, Tolkien created an anthology, which is kind of an appendix, an after story to the story, just detailing their adventures together. And he talks about their closeness and their connection. And as the movie moves forward, as the books move forward, you start to feel their affection and their brotherhood growing through their shared trials. And that's what it is. They don't actually, it's not like they just have a great conversation. It's through hardship and through battle and through having to rely on each other. You have Gandalf the Grey, who's kind of a worn down, wise but tired old wizard, and he after defeating this huge enemy, this big demon, he realizes his potential. And he becomes, probably with Aragorn, Frodo, and Gandalf are the key to the story, right? To defeating the big bad guy. And then, of course, you have the hobbits. And the hobbits, they had a lot of reason to be insecure. 3 feet tall, no one cares about them, no one thinks they can do anything. Even you don't think. Even you're like looking at this and you're like, why did Tolkien pick 4? Like, there's only 9 in the Fellowship. You populated half with almost useless characters. And what you find is that each of them overcomes their greatest obstacle to get to the end. Why are we talking about this? Without the quest, without the journey, none of these characters become who they were meant to be. If the hobbits just jump on the back of the eagles and just chuck it in, you don't get this. You don't get the lessons, the friendship lessons, the camaraderie. Everything about the Fellowship is because of what they went through together. It was the journey. It was the horrible circumstances, the fear, the selfless courage, the belief in each other. I mean, you can see all kinds of potential ways we could take this now. Each of these 9 in the Fellowship were called to this journey, very specifically. In fact, each of their call is detailed in the books and the movies. And of course, if you're familiar with the Old Testament in the Bible, or the New, but especially the Old Testament, you see a story after story of Yahweh calling his people. And it is constant. Think about the call of Esther, right? Esther is called in this really troubling time in the history of Jerusalem. She's called to become queen. And the reason she's called is to save her people. She's got this amazing line kind of in the middle of the story where she has to approach the king. And it's kind of the moment where if this doesn't go well, the Jews, there's going to be genocide among the Jews. And she says, if I perish, I perish. It's just this awesome moment for her. And she goes, and of course she ends up saving the Jews. Of course, the call of Abraham, perhaps the most famous call of any call. Abraham is called to leave his home, to move his family, and to go to an unknown land. And he's called in a way that's so dramatic because God says, I want you to leave. But he doesn't tell him where to go. He just says, start walking. And he walks for decades. And of course, we know him as the father of faith. Of course, we have Gideon. The call of Gideon to raise up as a nobody. In fact, in the Old Testament, the Israelites are being oppressed by foreign nations. And God calls this one guy, Gideon. And when he calls him, he sends this angel to talk to him. And the angel says, God be with you, mighty warrior. And Gideon's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And he actually starts to complain. He starts to tell him, like, hey, I'm not sure you got the right guy. Like, he tries to convince him that he's not the right guy. Moses does the same thing. God called Moses to the burning bush. And Moses is like, are you sure that I'm your dude? Like, are you 100% sure? And he's very insecure. You have, of course, Mary. Mary, that's a dramatic call, right? The mother of Jesus. Gabriel comes and he tells this probably 14-year-old girl, maybe 15, you're gonna have to raise the Messiah. Oh, and by the way, your whole family and all your community is going to think that you slept with a man and got pregnant. And you're probably going to be disgraced, and you're probably going to be rejected. It's like, man. The Bible is full of calls. And it's full of people saying yes, but you know what also? There's stories of people saying no. There's stories of people saying yes for selfish reasons. Perhaps you're familiar with the story of Samson. Samson is called to save his people, and he does so, but he does so in a way that destroys his own life and family and spirituality. Even his ending is selfish. Read the story. He's called, and he answers the call, sort of. Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. What is God calling you to right now? What kind of person is God calling you to become this year? What obstacle do you know God is telling you to overcome right now? Like, what stands in between you and a deeper, more intimate relationship with God? We all have that thing. Whether you're in a season of your life where you're seeking God and you're struggling with that search, perhaps you know there's something in your life you need to let go of. We all have these times. Perhaps there's something you're afraid to do, but you know you need to do. Someone you need to become that you're afraid to become because you know the pain's going to require to get there. If you reject God's call, you will never become the person God created you to be. Answering God's call, it requires humility to hear. You have to listen. And have you ever, when Kate called out to me that night, I did not want to hear her. I was like, I was trying actually to ignore it. Because I didn't want the pain that would come with the answer to that call, which was the smell of vomit. I did not want that. But I had to. It's my daughter. I think sometimes you know God's calling to you, but you're not listening, or you can hear it, but you really don't want the potential consequences of saying yes to that call. And so your fear, or pride, or insecurity, or selfishness keeps you from answering the call. And then you become less. You don't grow. You don't become the woman or the man that God wants you to be. Answering the call requires courage. But you know what it also requires? And we're going to kind of end here. Answering God's call doesn't just require courage. It requires self-awareness. You have to know where you are to get where you want to go. And I want to talk a little bit about some things that I feel like God is calling me to, perhaps to give you a little bit of a jump start for yourself, if you haven't answered that question yet. What stage of your spiritual journey are you on? That will help you think about what God's calling you to become or to do. Perhaps you're at a time of learning and growing. Some of us are just in a time of learning and growing. You know, there are 12 people got baptized in our church last year, which is amazing. And I will tell you that those 12, those of you who are in here, this is a year of growth for you. This is a year of strengthening those spiritual muscles, because I guarantee you, if Satan can take you out early in your spiritual life, the impact you will have is cut exponentially. The person you could become, the easiest thing for him to do, if he can't take you out before, he'll take you out early. It's a time of growing, of learning, of reinvesting, committing to the family, committing to Jesus more and more every day. Perhaps, I know some of you are in a time of deconstruction. This is kind of a buzzword in our culture. Deconstruction is the idea that you have to tear down old ways of thinking that were unhealthy. The problem sometimes with deconstruction is that sometimes you tear down things that were good too. If you're in a time of deconstruction where you're rethinking your life, my encouragement for you is make sure that you also reconstruct your faith. Amen. Don't just deconstruct it and then leave it as rubble. It doesn't do anybody any good, especially not you. You must also reconstruct it. Right? Perhaps you're in a time where what you need is stillness and solitude. Have you felt that before? Like, I just need quiet. I need to listen. If you're going to have solitude in our world, you have to intentionally create it. Because you're not going to stumble upon quiet. You have to make it happen. Or maybe you're at a time of pain and perseverance. Sometimes what you think this year is for you is not what it is for you. Last year, I thought last year was going to be a time of just like cranking my own personal growth. I was like, I'm going to read like 12 books. Like, I think I read like half of 3. I didn't realize it was going to be a time of growth, but not the way I anticipated. And many of you know the story. I won't detail it now, but the things we went through with our youngest, at times, were the greatest suffering I had ever faced. Now, granted, there are people in here that have faced far greater suffering than I, but most people that know the story would call it suffering. It was hard. And I will tell you, it changed me. I did not expect that to happen, but if my wife and I didn't choose to be faithful in that time, it would have changed us only for the worse. Yeah. But because we chose faith, because we'd seen people go before us be faithful, we're stronger for it. Where am I right now? I feel like right now, 2 things I feel very strongly is, one, I feel like God is calling me to a healthier, stronger leadership in my family, in my immediate family, my wife and my children, particularly through the implementation of consistent spiritual rhythm. Last year really threw us out of rhythm. Have you ever just gotten thrown out of rhythm? It happens sometimes when you're sick. You have like a good thing going, then you get sick, and you're like, no! Like, you have to start over. I felt that about the entire year last year. I feel like Chris and I both have really talked about needing to find better rhythms with things like how we're training our children to become passionate followers of Jesus. How we're taking care of our own spirituality. We're trying to go on spiritual retreats this year. Where Kristen goes for like a couple days by herself, just with God. I do the same thing. The other ones have the kids, and we pray for each other when we leave us with the 3 kids. Even in being a husband, I feel like there are things that I would tell you I did not do well this year. I didn't do a great job intentionally creating space for Chris and I to get out of the house together. It was very hard to do with Noel. And some of that I understand, but I realize that we're in a time now where I have to be more intentional for our marriage. I feel that way about our family. And I think also for the church, I really have felt called last couple of months, but especially this year, to continue to work together to create the healthiest culture we can. A culture where people that have been hurt and abused by life, by people, by church, can come and feel like they heal here. But it's very important to me that our church isn't so focused on healing that we become permissive about righteousness.
Yeah.
What do I mean? I think it's possible to create a safe, let's say Max is feeling hurt, and he comes to me. One way I create a safe place for him is just by listening and saying nothing back. I'm so sorry that happened. Wow, that sounds really tough. Man, I can't believe that happened to you. And then it's like, what do you want to do now? You know what I mean? And but hurt people, I know because I have been a hurt person, hurt people are also absolutely prone to sin. Perhaps even especially so. In my pain is when I'm most prone to unrighteousness.
Yeah.
I think the church needs to be a place where the theoretical Max can come and feel very hurt and be super loved and feel trusted and given to, but also a place where people are like grow in righteousness. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
I feel very strongly about that. I feel very called to that. Perhaps God will show us how to do that together. So, what I want you to do is I want to look back at that paper. I asked you a question. What is God calling you to? I want to take just a couple moments, maybe 5 minutes, before we have our communion prayer and sing one more song and have a couple announcements and we'll be done. And I actually want to have a little discussion as a group. Just, you can raise your hand. I want you to answer this question. What is God calling you to right now? To become, to be, to grow through, to overcome? Take a second, and we'll see who the very super brave first person will be. And when you share, share your heart and keep it maybe short-ish. And we'll just do it for a little bit. We'll just hear from each other, and then we'll move forward. So, anybody want to start off? Val.
I feel that God is calling me to more volunteerism, and especially in the eyes of the poor around us. We live in a rich county, and I feel that there's a lot of opportunities to reach out to more people because we are so blessed ourselves. So just to kind of reflect on that.
That's awesome. And I especially love about that it's like the people around you. It's great.
Yeah, this really spoke to me today because I've been feeling for a long time, like God has been telling me to start my own practice, my own prayer practice, daily practice. And I've had the ball rolling, and it's ready to start. And I'm so scared.
That's great. Yeah, start your own practice. Yeah, that's not something I feel called to do. But it's awesome that you do. It sounds like fear sometimes stands in between.
So I've been going to my mom's church as well for a while, and I feel like God is calling me to this mission trip in Brazil. It'll be, a lot of it is going to be medical aid, but it'll also be providing support for women and children, especially, which I'm something something I feel very passionate about. I sent in my application today. I'm scared, to be honest, because I've never been to Brazil. I haven't flown on a plane in 13 years. But I think it's just about overcoming fear as well and doing what God wants us to do.
It's great. Very inspiring. Love it. That's one way to do your first scary airplane trip. Rip the Band-Aid off like an 8-hour. I don't know if there's very many stops along the way. Sounds great. Max.
Yeah, I think for most of you guys who know me, I've been on a journey with like emotion for a long time. I grew up, my dad was an alcoholic, so very early on just emotions were an option and I chose no. So I think it's been something where I've been trying to figure out how to develop emotion, actually feel it and engage with it instead of just pushing it to the side. And so I think that's the place I'm getting called to that I don't want to go. But I feel like I need to, and I feel like that's been the past probably 6 months is coming to terms with like, okay, I probably need to figure this out. Now what is actually going to be the practical steps, but yeah.
Excellent. And you have really pursued that, bro. Jared?
Yeah. So I think at this point in my life, like you brought up reconstruction of faith and values, and that's something I've been really called to do as of recently, like really just trying to be a better person for those around me and to heal from my own personal things and to really work on like in social aspects, like this is not what you can do for me, but maybe what can I do for you type of things.
That's great. Sabrina and Chad.
I would say that mine is gratitude and perseverance. I think that I feel like going through hard times, my first thing that I lose is gratitude, and then I get tired of it, and I'm just kind of like, I want to be done now. So I think being able to go through pain or suffering or just times of having to push through and still remaining grateful and content during it.
It's great. Super self-aware. Chad and Juan.
I've found that my struggles with selfish ambition have been really resurfacing. It's something I struggled with when I was a young Christian, like a long time ago. And I feel like I've had much victory, but the problem is, I feel like with that victory has come a lot of time in the spotlight, which is an addictive thing. Speaking publicly, being recognized for my accomplishments, and like that has turned into a critical eye towards others and a resentment when I'm not recognized, and it's evil, and I feel like God's calling me to really evaluate that in my heart and be very open about that and be very transparent when I see that. There's a quote that I read years ago, and it's really stuck with me, and it says, "Make it your ambition to be known for nothing." And I rarely find myself making that my ambition. And so I really want to go after that.
I'll stop encouraging you publicly. I hear what you're putting down. No, thanks, bro. Juan.
In the past, it's been very easy to walk away and turn away from my family, my biological family. Go to college, don't come back for 3-4 years, just from not wanting to go back to Flint. I'm realizing that through being healed, through the word, through the church, through the love of everybody else, God's been preparing me to basically take leadership and ownership of my family, be the new man of the house, take care of them, teach, lead the community, and be there for them. So, that being said, plan to spend a lot more time with my family in the next coming year. Yeah, proud of where I am right now, and I want them to be the same way.
Well said, Rob. Jen?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my life, God will make things clear, and then I'll only give those things like 10% of my heart. He'll open doors, and it's kind of like I check it off my list, but I'm not giving it really what I can. And he's like, I opened this door for you. You're not going through it often enough, whether it's a service opportunity or something like that. But yeah, I've been thinking about, we've been doing more devotionals with the kids too. So like what you said, kind of like struck a nerve, just the consistency of reading with them, asking them what they think the scriptures mean, teaching them like at dinner, making it consistent. Like clearly, like this is a ministry God's given you. Like this is not just a side thing.
Yeah, no one else can be their parents, right?
Right. So like that would be like obviously number one, ministry, and then figuring out like why God is doing what He's doing, kind of just not ignoring who He's putting in our lives. And Ramayan, since he's been working, with his own business for the last year or two, we've met some really incredible people, probably at least 10 couples that we've been building friendships with who are really seeking hard. Some of them have come out to church, and I'm thinking like instead of like one Bible study at a time, we just open our home. A lot of them know each other, and we just open our home and start this Bible talk with these people that we already know, who already know each other, through these business ventures with him. So if you guys could be praying for that, I think it's like the kids and that, like it's just already there right in front of us. So
Great.
go for it.
Well said. All right, we'll do 3 more. We'll do Sammy, Amber, and Marlon. In that
Me
order.
first. Okay.
You first.
So mine is reconstruction, but it's not a spiritual reconstruction, but more of a psychological one. I've just been going through this podcast called Encountering You. I highly recommend it. I got KJ on it now. And it's just going back and looking at what things you might have brought with you as a child that you learned that might have been a healthy coping mechanism for you in the moment, but now in my 30s is more devastating to me and my children than it is helpful. And just kind of re-examining how my old family dynamics might have snuck into our new ways of life, and how I think and it impacts my faith. Like, how do I look at God the Father when certain ways I look at men and leadership in my life don't always, add up. So that's mine.
That's great. Well shared. Amber and then Marlon.
So I'm throwing this out there for the accountability because I honestly don't really want to do it, but vulnerability and consistency have never been strong suits in my character outside of my very small core group of people. And because of that, I really feel like my relationships with the body have suffered, particularly with the sisters. And I feel like my lack of really deep foundational friendships with the sisters directly impacts my relationship with God, and how my relationship with God could be so much better if I really allowed myself to have that community on a deeper level. And so even though it's difficult for me to be vulnerable and build those deep friendships, I really feel like that's something that God is making it apparent in me that I need. So.
Well, great sharing. Marlon, go ahead and finish this off.
I'm just going to stand up because that's how I like to talk. But I feel like God has called me to have more faith even when things are risky or seem like something can be unpredictable or it just doesn't make sense. And right now, I'm practicing getting my life health license, so I'm very much close to doing so, finishing that. But I just found out about this convention that's going to be pretty much very valuable for me to do and go to, but it's last minute, and it's like, even though it's last minute, I have to pay for this and that, but like I shouldn't worry about what I have to pay for. word about having my faith in this opportunity and that it's going to work out. So I done had a lot of opportunities that I turned down, and I don't want to turn down another one just because I feel like this is just another type of calling for me to not only be the person I want to be, but be the person God wants me to be. So that's what I'm really focusing on this year, having more faith, even when it seems scary.
Well shared, everybody. I really appreciate the level of vulnerability. It's great. Kind of like Amber expressed, when you don't, when you want to do something that you don't want to do, tell 50 people. We'll make sure. How's it going? You haven't called me. I appreciate you guys sharing. What I want to do now is we're going to say 2 brief prayers. In a moment, Zach's going to come up. I did want to mention, I just want to pray for Juwan's family. Juwan's family just lost his father about 2 weeks ago. So if it's all right with you, we're just going to pray for your family and for you. And then Zach will come up, pray for Lord's Supper. We'll sing a song. And Chad will close us with just a couple quick announcements. All right? Let's do that. Father God, we love you even